He's the most legendary and famous pirate of all time. In modern days, we know him as the most ruthless, bloodthirsty pirate to ever sail the seven seas. But that's not really who he was. The only documented proof of him ever taking a life was in his final battle. Using a combination of fear tactics, a terrifying appearance, and the world's best PR campaign, his name and legend would strike fear in the hearts of mariners all over the Caribbean. And this was so effective that they would just give up without a fight. This is the true story of the dread captain, Blackbeard.
Blackbeard.
Before we get into the video, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps the channel grow and it doesn't cost you a thing. So Edward Teach, or Blackbeard, is inarguably the most famous pirate of all time. He was a master of making himself a terror of the high seas. He wore a bandolier of 7 pistols. He had swords and knives all around his waist. He would tuck wicks of burning rope under his hat and braid it into his long black beard, from which he got his name. And with the smoke billowing around him, he would cut such a terrifying image that people would just surrender without a fight at the mere sight of him. But where did this all begin? Edward Teach was born in Bristol sometime around 1680. We don't know for sure because most pirates don't have much written about their early lives. It's believed that he first went to sea as a privateer during the Spanish War of Succession, fighting on the side of the English. And eventually he would make his way to Jamaica and be known as a man of uncommon boldness and courage. In 1716, he would make his way to the island of New Providence, where he would meet a notorious, renowned pirate, Benjamin Hornigold, who would take him into his crew and give him command of a small sloop. And together, these two pirates would work together to capture several ships containing such goods as wine and wheat, trade items. Shortly after this, Blackbeard would encounter the rich boy pretending to be a pirate, Stede Bonnet, who I talk about in this video. Link in the description below. So, Stede Bonnet's crew were not very pleased with this Nepo baby LARPing as a pirate, and were more than happy to let Blackbeard take over command of Bonnet's ship, the Revenge. So Hornigold and Blackbeard would go on to capture several more sloops, but Hornigold was hesitant to attack any English vessels because he was still fiercely loyal to England. However, his crew didn't see friendly ships, they saw riches sailing away, and eventually Hornigold was voted out of his captaincy and he would retire from piracy forever. However, he would go on to become a notorious pirate hunter. But the life of Benjamin Hornigold is a story for another time. With Hornigold's departure, Blackbeard was given command of the small fleet and began to forge his own legacy. So now Blackbeard had his own fleet of 2 ships, including Stede Bonnet's the Revenge. However small his fleet was, though, Blackbeard would go on to capture a large French vessel, La Concorde, which was carrying a large cargo of slaves. So after capturing La Concorde, he would take the French crew from the ship and put it on his smaller sloop and just let them go. And they would rename the sloop Mauvaise Rencontre, which means bad meeting. Some of the slaves would join his crew, but the rest he just kind of released on shore. Blackbeard would take La Concorde and rename it into his infamous flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. He would kit out the Queen Anne's Revenge with 40 guns, and he was now ready to begin his reign of terror. In November of 1717, he captured a large merchant vessel called the Great Allen, and he would again take the crew ashore, disembark them, steal all the loot, and then he set the ship ablaze. See, leaving all these people alive allowed them to spread his legacy throughout the Caribbean. Then in December, he captured a merchant sloop called the Margaret. Blackbeard took the Margaret's crew and their captain, Henry Bostock, captive and told them all about all the ships he'd captured and set on fire. And then he asked them about all the other ships that were sailing around the region. After emptying all the loot from the Margaret, he then returned the crew and the captain to their ship and let them go. When Bostock returned home, he would tell of his terrifying encounter with this dreaded captain, and his infamy would continue to spread. One writer, Charles Johnson, would describe Blackbeard as such a figure that imagination cannot form an idea of a fury from hell to look more frightful. So, he was scary. So, despite his demonic appearance, there's very little evidence of Blackbeard ever actually harming the people that he took captive. So, in spite of this, his reputation would spread to a point where he would capture ships without even a fight, simply having to don his characteristic outfit and raise his black flag. Now, I love the look of this flag. I even have a copy of it up in my bathroom, but there's no evidence that he ever actually used this, and is probably a recreation by later writers. The only contemporary account we have of what kind of flag he used was either a black flag with a skull on it, or simply a red flag. And a red flag means that a pirate's going to show no quarter if you don't surrender. So basically he was saying, surrender or I'm going to kill all of you. So obviously they would just surrender. Over the next year, Blackbeard would continue to grow his fleet. He sailed around Hispaniola, leaving a trail of looted and burned ships in his wake. In March of 1718, he captured the Jamaican ship, the Adventure, and invited their captain and crew to join his fleet, which they gladly accepted. And now, Blackbeard's fleet of 2 had now become 3 ships. The Queen Anne's Revenge, Stede Bonnet's Revenge, and now the Adventure. They would then sail to the Bay of Honduras, where they captured 1 large vessel and 3 smaller sloops, bringing the count up to 7. He sailed his small fleet around Florida and Havana, where he would capture another Spanish vessel before making his way up to North Carolina. So on the way to Charlestown, North Carolina, Blackbeard would grant himself the title of Commodore Blackbeard. His fleet would set up a blockade around the port of Charlestown, and over the next 6 days they captured 9 vessels, including the Crowley, which had on board a member of the Council of the Province of Carolina, a man by the name of Samuel Wragg. Blackbeard would take Wragg and the other people on the ship captive, and he would ransom them back to Carolina for a chest full of medicine. Once his demands were eventually met, Blackbeard would release the captives back to Charlestown. However, before they left, Blackbeard got information that the famous pirate hunter Woodes Rogers had just set out from England, intent on wiping out all piracy in the Caribbean, with a fleet of several man-of-war ships, which were huge vessels full of guns and stuff, very scary for pirates. So Blackbeard would attempt to repair and clean the Queen Anne's Revenge by careening her on a place called Beaufort Inlet in North Carolina. However, his flagship would run aground and be damaged beyond all repair. There's some speculation that he did this on purpose, because the Queen Anne's Revenge was very recognizable and it made it tricky for him to go to port, but others say that it was just an accident. Which I think makes more sense, because they attempted to rescue the Queen Anne's Revenge, and in that attempt, the Adventure was also run aground and lost. Remarkably, in November of 1996, private researchers were able to find the wreck of the Queen Anne's Revenge, and it is now on the National Register of Historic Places. So that's pretty cool. Eventually, Blackbeard would get word of a pardon being offered to all pirates who ceased their pirate activities by January 5th of 1718. However, the blockade that they had just done was after that point, and he was afraid that if he tried to get this pardon, that they would just arrest him. So to test the waters, he sent Stede Bonnet ashore to Bath, North Carolina, to try and get a pardon first. So Bonnet went ashore and met with Governor Charles Eden. Bonnet was granted his pardon and came back to the Revenge, but by the time he got there, Blackbeard had looted all of the treasure from the Revenge and marooned its crew. So Stede was left with an empty ship. I go over this whole story in my Stede Bonnet video, but in short, he got the ship going, was able to find and rescue the crew that had been marooned, but then he could never catch up or find Blackbeard again. Blackbeard himself would also sail to Bath and get his own pardon from Governor Eden, and then Eden would instruct him to sail to St. Thomas to receive a letter of marque and become a privateer. So Blackbeard took his remaining sloop and renamed it the Adventure. However, despite having an actual commission for privateering, he would return to piracy pretty much right away. He went and captured a large French ship, and when he brought it back to Bath, Governor Eden was like, "Hey, where'd you get that ship?" And Blackbeard's like, we found it.
It fell off a truck."
And Eden was like, "All right, sure." So in the summer of 1718, Blackbeard was hanging out at his favorite hangout in Oracoke Island with some other famous pirates such as Charles Vane. So news of this pirate P-A-R-T-Y spread throughout the neighboring colonies until it came to the ears of Alexander Spotswood, the governor of Virginia, and he enlisted Lieutenant Robert Maynard to hunt down the notorious pirate. On November 18th, 1718, Maynard was given command of 2 sloops, the Jane and the Ranger, and on November 21st, he found Oracoke Island, but waited till the morning to begin his attack. He had to stop other ships from sailing to the island so that Blackbeard wouldn't get news of the oncoming attack. And of course, Blackbeard was still busy partying with his crew and hadn't left a lookout. Some of his crew were even on shore at the time, doing what pirates do, so he had even less crew aboard his ship, only around 24 people. So when the morning broke, Blackbeard found himself under attack by 2 English vessels. Maynard himself was on the Jane, and then another man named Hyde was captaining the Ranger. In an attempt to escape, Blackbeard cut the anchor chain on the Adventure and tried to escape up a narrow channel. However, he miscalculated how deep the water was and the Adventure ran aground. So he turned the guns onto the 2 approaching ships and fired a devastating broadside. 20 men aboard the Jane were injured or killed, and 9 men aboard the Ranger. However, Hyde and all of his commanding officers were a part of that 9, and the Ranger itself had been crippled so badly that it couldn't be part of the fight anymore. Eventually, the 2 English ships also ran aground in the shallow water, and it kind of became a race to the finish to see who could get their ship dislodged first, while still firing muskets and stuff from one ship to the other. So Maynard was able to get the Jane afloat before Blackbeard was, and he ordered his men to hide below decks. And when the Jane approached the Adventure, Blackbeard saw what looked like an empty ship. So the pirates threw their grappling hooks over, as well as a bunch of grenades to help clear the deck, and as the smoke cleared, Blackbeard led his men from the Adventure onto the Jane. But as soon as their feet touched the deck, Maynard's men came up from underneath and surprised the pirates with their superior numbers. The 2 captains met on deck, and Blackbeard and Maynard pulled out their pistols and started firing at each other. Blackbeard missed, but Maynard hit Blackbeard. However, they weren't done. Once the pistols were spent, they tossed them away and drew their cutlasses, and began a duel to the death. However, while this was happening, the rest of Blackbeard's crew were being overwhelmed by Maynard's men and being pushed to the bow of the ship. Once the pirates were cornered, the rest of Maynard's men surrounded Blackbeard and Maynard to watch their fight. Blackbeard broke Maynard's cutlass at the hilt and was about to deliver a final blow when he was slashed from behind by one of Maynard's men, which caused him to miss the killing blow and just cut Maynard across his knuckles. At this point, the rest of Maynard's men fell on Blackbeard, slashing and hacking and shooting at him. And when Blackbeard finally fell, he had sustained 5 bullet wounds and 20 slashes and stabs. Guy was a tank. So, Maynard removed Blackbeard's head and threw the body into the sea. Now, legend says that the body swam 3 times around the ship before finally sinking down and being claimed by Davy Jones' locker. Maynard would hang Blackbeard's head from the bow of his ship and he returned home to Virginia to claim the bounty on the most infamous and fearsome pirate to ever sail the Spanish Main. Edward Teach truly garnered a fearsome reputation as the bloodthirsty pirate Blackbeard. But the truth is, he never killed anyone if he didn't have to, and he was hesitant to torture any of the captives that he ever took. In fact, it was just his reputation alone that made people surrender and give up information. He was so good at creating this image for himself that ships would surrender without a fight, and we still remember him as the most fearsome pirate ever to this day. But despite the brutal manner of his death, Blackbeard will live forever in literature, in books, movies, and video games, anime. He was Batman once, and he will continue to live on as long as we remain fascinated by these pirates from the Golden Age. He's been portrayed on screen by such actors as John Malkovich, Ray Stevenson, Ian McShane, and even Taika Waititi. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more pirate history and lore. And feel free to leave a comment suggesting any other pirates that you want to see me cover on this series. I'll also be posting a link to the channel Discord in the description below, so if you guys want to come chat about pirates, Zelda, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, whatever you want, come say hi in the Discord. Now, don't forget to drink water, do your push-ups, and stay safe. Till next time. He captured a large merchant to a point where he would in Blackbeard.
Blackbeard.